to ask him what protocol was.
Good afternoon. Welcome to our workshop of May 30th. Today's topic is budget presentation, so I'm going to turn it over for Mr. Hunsicker.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. We have some of the staff here today, and I want to thank you and the staff for this opportunity. So let's begin. We have a bit of interesting information, we think, for the board relative to the budget for the next 2 years and even beyond that point in time. So good afternoon, commissioners, county staff, and members of the public. As we begin today's discussion on the 2018 and 19 budget, I'd like to thank all of you for the opportunity to serve you and to work with a truly exceptional team of employees at Manatee County government for the past 10 years. For the majority of my time as Manatee County Administrator, our budgets have been mostly focused on reducing government services. The Great Recession and voter-approved tax reform of 2008 sent local revenues plummeting while the population continued to rise. Despite financial setbacks, we have achieved so much. Our credit ratings are among the strongest in the state. We found ways to construct major new infrastructure projects like the Fort Hamer Bridge and 44th Avenue Extension. We created an economic development incentive package and staffed it with a stellar team to work with this board to assist business relocate, grow, and thrive in Manatee County, meaning new opportunities for many of the 60,000 people who have moved here since 2007. This is my final budget recommendation, and we find ourselves in a unique position. This is the first annual spending plan in a full decade that will not rely on reserves to balance the budget. The board's plan to draw down budget stabilization funds instead of resort to service reductions has worked exceedingly well over time. While we reduced the government 25% and cut 18% of our workforce, at no point in time did we consume savings to the point of reducing the board's standing 20% reserves or impacting your stellar credit ratings. The gross budget I'm recommending for fiscal year 18 is $1,351,213,664. Remember, the gross budget includes reserves and internal services and transfers. Next year's budget recommendation is larger than your current adopted budget, due largely to new revenues and expenditures associated with the county's new infrastructure sales tax. By removing reserves and internal services and transfers, we're left with an annual net budget. Rising property values, new construction, and continued population growth have meant more than an 8% increase for the next year's net budget, which equals an estimated $47 million revenues above your current adopted budget, net budget of $568 million. The FY18 net budget is $614,906,994. A large portion of the net budget is comprised of enterprise funds, like our utility system and other restricted funds that must be spent for specific purposes. For example, tourist tax revenues cannot be used for general government spending. When we remove these enterprise and restricted funds, the remaining budget is $341 million, comprised of our tax funds. We've talked about those. That's the general fund, the library trust fund, transportation trust fund, and municipal services taxing unit. Constitutional office budgets consume about 57% of the general fund expenses. The county commission portion of the general fund is $119 million, which is available to pay for quality of life areas like libraries, parks, community services, and neighborhood services. It has been a decade since we have seen this kind of growth in the tax base. This puts you in the unique position of being able to prioritize long-term investments more proactively. Instead of having to decide where to cut or how much to borrow, this board is now in a position to use the budget as a tool to address your priorities. The challenge this year will be one of setting priorities. There is certainly no shortage of critical needs to consider for Manatee County, part of the 10 fastest growing regions in the country. As part of my final budget recommendation, Now is a good time to remind you and the community of some of the biggest current and future needs facing our local government. These are significant policy decision areas for the board that will help determine the future of our organization and our community. Throughout my tenure as a county administrator, my first priority has been our workforce, the 1,700 local residents who make up this government and who make this government run, and who are our organization's most important asset. In recent years, the board has approved funding for annual market equity increases and for a successful pay-for-performance program that rewards quality work. A continued investment in our employees will mean more than simply increasing salaries to remain competitive with nearby local governments and private sector businesses. It also means dealing with the extreme stress in our workforce that grows with each new service demand. More than just salaries, you should also consider a thorough evaluation of our employee benefits and a compensation study to ensure that you are on track to meet employee demands of a new era. Later this year, our Parks Master Plan will be complete, giving you a set of professional recommendations for new parks, green space, and trails for Manatee County families and visitors to enjoy for decades to come. The Parks Master Plan will require you to make a commitment to funding those amenities, not just for 1 or 2 years, but also into the future. Perhaps this commitment should also include a second Parks Master Plan for 20 years instead of the 40 years we've waited for this one. We finally had the money to pay for Parks Master Plan. Along the same lines, the Utility Master Plan will require resources to meet the water and wastewater demands of a community approaching 500,000 people. Potable water, wastewater, and irrigation lines will need to be built in the fast-growing areas of the county. No less important, the aging utility lines in West Bradenton and other areas of the county will need to be replaced. As families continue to move here and real estate prices grow, our residents will continue to look to the community leaders to lead the discussion on affordable and workforce housing. Rather than trying to influence the housing market or get into the housing building industry ourselves, you should consider creative solutions beyond simply paying down impact fees to incentivize affordable home construction. If you make the philosophical decision to support housing for working classes, you should also decide where community health care fits into the list of priorities. Health care is an exceedingly complex issue that becomes an increasingly more local issue as more state and federal leaders reduce funding and health care subsidies for individuals. And despite the changing political influences, there is at least one certainty in the healthcare arena: medical costs will continue to rise. As federal and state subsidies shrink, what will be the role of your government in ensuring our residents have access to quality health care? The recent passage of our infrastructure sales tax puts you in a better position to extend the life of local parks and roads through repair and maintenance. In recent years, we found ways to bond new major roads such as the Fort Hammer Bridge, 44th Avenue Extension. Improving our transportation network remains an extremely important issue to anyone traveling crowded roads to schools and work each morning. Where is the need for the next major thoroughfare? You will need to make that decision and prioritize it within future budgets. We talk frequently about new roads, parks, and affordable housing to accommodate the multitudes who are moving here, but growing community has other practical needs. You need to begin planning, expand Manatee County Jail, or to plan for a new local detention facility. Now is also the time to begin scouting a location for Manatee County's next landfill to prepare for the Lena Road facility reaching capacity in the next 20 years. Both of these facilities are major capital undertakings that will require large areas of accessible land, and the board will need to begin those community discussions early in the planning process. During future conversations of new government buildings, roads, or parks, also must plan and budget for the long-range impacts of sea level rise that will impact major decisions on where you build and plan for the future. These are just some of the considerable issues facing county leadership as you set priorities and refine budgets this year and beyond. A budget with healthy revenues gives you additional options to implement long-range goals. The challenge before you is one of setting those goals and prioritizing them on top of the things we already fund today. As discussed during last week's budget conversation with the constitutional officers, you are faced with $39 million in funding requests and year-over-year increases as part of next year's budget. Having a set of priorities will help guide the decision-making process as you determine which of the $39 million in funding requests you are able to meet. Rising property values, new construction, and modest growth from other revenues will result in $24 million that you may consider to meet these needs of a growing community. But you must also plan for another significant reduction in local revenues as a result of Tallahassee politics. This spring, state lawmakers approved placing an initiative on next year's ballot that asks voters to consider an additional property tax exemption that would apply to assessed values between $100,000 and $125,000. The budget I present you today anticipates that voters will approve the additional exemption in 2018. If the additional homestead is approved by voters, we are projecting an annual impact of $8.2 million that would impact your fiscal year 20 budget. Such a hit to revenues would mean significant reductions to services, including potential workforce reductions in 3 years. I believe you can avoid these difficult decisions by addressing the 2020 shortfall today. With $39 million in new requests, it would be tempting to address as many of them as possible with the $24 million you have available. Today, we present you with a plan to both offset the impacts of the $8.2 million in reduced revenues and address community needs. In each of the next 3 years, we will be recommending committing $2.8 million, about 1/3 of the $8.2 million, to one-time expenses instead of additional reoccurring expenses. Year 2 of the 3-year plan allows the board to spend $5.6 million in one-time expenses by exercising discipline and avoiding the urge to spend all the new revenues on reoccurring expenses. You will be in a position to reduce your annual operating budget by $8.2 million without reducing services in the 3rd year of this plan. Later this summer, we will present you with options to consider for those one-time expenditures. This recommendation to invest $2.8 million in one-time capital expenses, combined with the $21.7 million in infrastructure sales tax projects, represents the largest change between the current adopted budget and next year's recommended budget. In addition, I'm recommending additional investments in law enforcement and public safety. This budget recommendation includes funding for 10 additional law enforcement officers and their vehicles and equipment for Manatee County Sheriff's Office. We have also included a recommendation for 2 new positions in the community paramedic program. It's the first year of operation. Our community paramedics have demonstrated a clear ability to curtail our overall health care expenditures significantly by helping their patients avoid costly trips to the emergency room. You will find additional details in the attachment included as part of this recommendation budget message. We will have even more information and details available in advance of each of the public workshops scheduled throughout the summer. There's a Schedule A that has detailed information. I'm not going to go through that. We have some information and some charts that Jan is going to put up on the screen, and I'd like to walk you through those now. Ready?
Can I
Yeah,
ask
go
a
ahead.
question before
Push
Jan
button.
comes up?
Please. Commissioner
Yes.
DiSabatino?
Thank you for all this information. The second to the last paragraph, when you indicated that you're going to recommend 10 additional law enforcement officers and 2 for the community paramedicine, those are recurring figures?
Yes.
So you have a plan for those recurring figures?
Yes.
Okay.
So, the first thing we'd like to take you through is an exercise we refer to as peeling the onion, because we have to publicize, according to state statute, the total budget. And your total budget for next year would be $1,351 million. And from that, we get to a net budget. So if you take out the internal transfers and the cash reserves, those total up to $736 million. You get to the net budget of $615 million. Then you subtract the enterprise funds. That's the utility system, the building department, tourist development dollars and the like. You subtract those operations out and the special revenue, debt service, and capital projects, and you get down to the tax funds. And those, as we've talked about before, are the general fund, the transportation trust fund, the library fund, and the unincorporated MSTU. And those four funds are $342 million. And then we get down to the general fund, the fund that the board has the most discretion in dealing with, and that's $274 million. And that's how you peel the onion to get from $1.3 billion down to the $274 million. And I think, as I remarked in my opening remarks, about 56% of that $274 million is the constitutional officers, and it leaves the board about $119 million for you to manage the operations of the county that get funded from general revenues, which is, for the most part, community services, neighborhood services, the Parks Department, and the like. And we'll be taking you through those in the coming weeks. Next one, Jan. Here's the increase in revenues we've talked about. Property taxes are about $18 million, and the infrastructure sales tax is $25 million. That's the majority of the increase in revenues comes from those two sources: a 9% anticipated growth in property tax revenue and the infrastructure sales tax. This is the first time we have infrastructure sales tax in the budget, and that's $25.1 million. And you can see on the right-hand side what's, whoop, jumped on it there. And you can see on the net budget of $615 million how that is distributed between the various revenue sources. Then go to the expenditure side. Out of the $47 million capital outlay, 60%, again, that's driven by the sales tax now being part of the budget. Public safety would consume 25%. Physical environment, that's your utility system, would be the 7%. Transportation is 4%, and everything else is the 4%. And on the right-hand side of the graph shows you that in pictorial format. Next, Jen. Here's how we would propose to deal with that problem that exists in 2020. If we did nothing, you have a 9% growth in the tax base, and the revenue associated with that would come in, and you would spend it. And you would see that spend at the same 9%. Next year, or the following year, in fiscal year 19, we anticipate an 8% growth in the tax base, and we could spend it all. And then in fiscal year 20, we anticipate a 5% growth in the tax base, being kind of conservative and that far out. And we could spend all of that. But the problem would be that revenue reduction of roughly $9 million, you would have to incorporate into that fiscal year budget, and you would have to go in and reduce those budgets by $9 million all in 1 year. That would be a very difficult process to go through. There would be probably staff layoffs and things that you added in 18 and 19, you would turn around and be subtracting back out. So that would be the challenge, but you could do that. That would be one of the options. The options that we think we would recommend to the board is one where in 18, you spend less on ongoing expenses, reoccurring expenses, spend less. And that one time is that color at the top, take that and set it aside. That's $2.8 million. You could spend that on one-time items, but keep the recurring expenditures at the lower level. In 19, you do it again, and now you have 2 years' worth of dollars, and you move those over into a category for one-time expenditures. Thus, when you get to fiscal year 20, you have now postured yourself to be able to deal with those reductions that come from the property tax cuts that we will face. Now, one could say the voters haven't spoken yet. Well, I look back at and you can, in 2008, we were in the middle of a recession. Property values were dropping. People's homesteaded property owners were seeing a tax reduction because the value of their properties were going down, and they still voted for that $25,000 reduction. So it's hard to believe that they won't vote for a property tax reduction in 2018, and it would be prudent to plan for them to do that and for us to reduce our reoccurring expenses starting now in anticipation of that. Then you would have those dollars, as we set aside, for one-time expenses. And we will work with you in the coming weeks to talk about what are some of the items that you would want to spend money on of a one-time nature. Sorry to say that we've come up with a list well in excess of the total here, but you will think of things also that the community needs that we just didn't have the money for. But those are issues that you can face, and this budget that I'm presenting you today is built on the concept of doing just that, setting those dollars aside and reducing what you commit to in reoccurring expenditures to a lesser amount than the property tax revenue that will come in. Now, next, Jan. This is what it would look like when you spread that $2.8 million across each of the different tax funds, because it would be shared by each fund. The general fund would be roughly, in fiscal year 18, 2.3 million, 102,000 in the transportation trust fund, 99,000 to the library fund, the children's services tax, 134 million, and the unincorporated MSTU, 178,000. So that's how it gets distributed amongst the different taxing funds. Next page. When we talk about how to build a budget, this is the process we go through in building a budget. First, we look at the property tax revenue. We anticipate a growth of 9%, and this is just in the general fund. That would amount to 14.6 million. And other revenues that inure to the general fund, we anticipate 2.2 million for a total new revenue of 16.8. What would we do with 16.8? Well, the first thing we look at is when we're doing a budget for a subsequent year, we look at what are we doing this year that we have to price it in next year's dollars. The electric bill goes up, the cost of gasoline goes up, everything has an inflationary cost. So to take what we're doing this year and price it in next year's dollars costs $6.3 million. Then employee compensation, that's at 4% for all employees, costs $5 million. Then, as I said, the $2.3 million we're going to set aside for one-time expenses. Then we have other items. We have healthcare. That's the ongoing cost of healthcare, the $6.9 million in community healthcare. We've reduced that, and we have a chart that I'll show you that's we've reduced that by $900,000. And then we've been taking healthcare out of reserves, and we have a plan to fully fund that with ongoing revenues over time. And this is taking $1 million a year for the next 3 years of new money, ongoing reoccurring revenues, so we don't have to rely on reserves to fund healthcare at that $6 million number. And then because revenues are up, the 20% reserve has to go up. That's 1.1 million for a total of 1.2 million. And then we have a growth level. Maintain service standards by adjusting for growth. Community is growing, more people are showing up, more roads are showing up. So that we funded some desired decision units in the general fund of 1.1 million, and you will see that when we go through the decision unit process. And the constitutionals and the sheriff, $900,000. And then we didn't have any more money for increased level of services, and that's how we propose to spend the $16.8 million. And that we will take you through in the coming workshops for your approval or changing as you deem appropriate. Next page. this is what's to come. On June 7th, we'll take you through each of the major funds. Remember, there's 150 funds. We won't take you through each of them, but the major funds. We'll take you through those one at a time to show you the revenues that we anticipate to come in, the expenditures that get charged to that fund, how those expenditures are changing over time, how much is in the reserves in that fund, how much in that fund gets transferred out to other funds, and take you through all of that business. And then on the 13th, we'll take you through all of the decision units from the budgets under the county administrator. And you'll see what we recommended for funding and what we're recommending not for funding. And then on the 14th, you'll revisit again the constitutional officers and their budgets. On the 15th, we'll take you through the capital improvement program, and you'll see in the capital improvement program all the projects proposed, not only for impact fees, but the new infrastructure sales tax projects. Again, we've programmed the first 5 years of the 15 years of the sales tax. And then there's a public hearing that night of the 15th. And then August 1st is the reconciliation date when you come back from your recess, where you will be setting the tentative millage rate. And then there's two public hearings in September on the 18th and the 25th. You are receiving next week the information about the fund summary book, the decision units. We've already provided you once all the decision units. We will provide you an update to that information that will reflect which of the decision units we've recommended for funding and which ones are not recommended for funding. And you'll receive that, and then you'll receive the CIP in advance of the CIP meeting, and all those documents will be forthcoming. So I think that concludes my presentation. There was an attachment to your package which has some detailed charts and graphs that we'll leave for your reading pleasure. We weren't going to take you through all of that detail. And with that, we begin the budget process for the balance of the summer. Again, I would tell you, you are probably the first Board of County Commissioners in the state of Florida to receive your budget. We'd be happy to answer any questions in the coming weeks and months leading up to final adoption of the budget. Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay, great, thank you. Commissioner DeSabatino.
Regarding the schedule on June 15th at 1:30, where you have the capital improvement plan, is that actually enough time? Because that usually goes on long, and do we get them all in? Because now we have the new half-cent sales tax. I'm just asking if, do you think that's enough time?
No. But
Maybe
this will be an introduction, and we'll be available to extend these meetings, have more meetings. You have the entire summer leading up till September adoption. And remember, the capital improvement program can be amended at any time. And so you shouldn't worry about not having enough time. We can spend as much time in as many workshops going through those documents as you deem appropriate to get comfortable with the spending plan.
Because I was just going to say, why don't we start that meeting at 9, and then if we're done earlier, then we'll have a little break in between that and the 6 o'clock. I'm just throwing that out there. The slide right before it, where you have the increase basically of 16.8, and then all the other breakdowns. So basically, if we don't increase one more nickel, we're even, taking into consideration cost of living increases and all the expenses. Is that basically what you're showing us?
I don't think I understood the question.
So you were saying that the increase of 16.8 million to the general fund, minus all these anticipated levels
Yes,
because of increases and expected increases, and then you have the increase in salaries and so forth. So basically, we can't spend any of that money on anything else because it's already spoken for.
well, no, this is just a recommended budget. You can change anything you want here. As we go through this, if you want to change it, it's up to you to change.
But
It's,
what I'm saying is, this is your expert opinion on what these costs of living expenses and inflationary expenses would be without doing anything. That's how I'm reading it.
Well, budgeting is an art more than a science. This is what I and my staff feel are what we're trying to guess your priorities without sitting down and talking to each one of you. Now that collectively you'll take it and say, perhaps, Ed, this isn't our priority. We need to change it. And that's fine. At the end of the day, the legislative process is to adopt a budget. And so you can change anything you want in this, and we will help you change those. And the revenues that we've forecasted, I'm pretty sure when we get to December, the revenues will change. So September revenues will be different than May's revenues. So the revenues will change. You can change the expenditure proposals. It's an open book. Somebody has to put something down first. That's what this is. Now we can start moving around the numbers.
Okay, Commissioner Whitmore?
Thanks for getting us to an end game of 2020 if the tax passes. And
It's
I've heard
an
that a lot.
option
Yeah,
to getting there without going to the cliff.
and I appreciate your professional staff, Jan and everybody back there. I heard you worked all weekend on it, so appreciate it. And then it's up to us to decide if this is the policy we want to follow. But this is a template. This is the administrator's budget, so we can change it if we want or not. So thanks a lot, Ed. Good job.
It's a start, not finish.
Right.
Just had a question about the healthcare, community healthcare. It looks like, from what I'm reading, just reading it just now, that we're going to change from 6.9 to 6 million by removing 893,468 for Blake Memorial and Rural Health. That's because it doesn't look like they're going to be able to take advantage of the funding?
Well, remember the recommendation that the board accepted is that if you want government dollars, Manatee County dollars, you have to participate in this network that provides us data. And they have opted not to. And because they've opted not to, they didn't participate this year. And so the dollars we've allocated in that 6.9 million for those two institutions, why keep allocating it if they're not going to participate? So I've recommended taking those two off the table. That takes the 6.9 million down to 6 million. And then we start with $6 million, and in the last couple of years, we've had some debt that's matured, and we've taken the money that we've spent on paying debt, and we've moved that, it's reoccurring revenue, to funding health care. So that's roughly $2 million. So the $2 million takes care of 2 million of the 6 million. Now you have 4 million. And if in the coming years you spend $1 million a year of new money, because instead of going to reserves, over a 3-year period, you'll be able to, by 2020, you'll be able to have all of that $6 million funded from reoccurring revenue, and you won't have to fund it from reserves. And your reserves then will be able to grow over time, so that the next time there's a recession, you will have some money in your reserve accounts to deal with it, as we've had the luck over the last 10 years. And you won't be dipping into reserves for any portion of your expenditure.
And that's.
And instead of doing it all at one time, you can do it piecemeal. It's one of the options for how to fund that healthcare, if you choose to fund healthcare.
And where I think, and I thought about that when you talk about, money for one-time expenses, it also could be money to be put into reserves, because it was the reserves that helped us get through the last 10 years, roughly, of not being able to have enough funding to pay for everything without making big cuts.
Yes.
The fact of the matter is that there were reserves in these budgets, and they put that money into our budget stabilization fund, and that's what we've lived off of. So it makes me a little bit nervous to going to spending down this one-time money without thinking about establishing some reserves. However, I say that with a caveat, because the legislature looks upon reserves as something that needs to be spent. I think there was a bill pending this past legislative session that had anything over 20% reserves, and maybe it was even lower than 20%, I don't recall, that would need to be spent before, and I'm not sure before what.
If you-
Can't remember.
That's a very good point. If you think in those terms and go back to 2008, and we had $40 million plus in reserves that has helped us survive 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12.
13, 14.
Was it
13,
roughly 10
14,
years? I'm off by a year.
We would have had nothing, and that means you would have had to cut, you and the boards back in those days would have had to cut more. So instead of reducing library hours, we would have been closing libraries. Instead of reducing park staff, we'd have been closing parks. Instead of mowing the medians every 3 or 4 weeks, we'd have been mowing them semi-annually. I mean, it would have been extremely difficult. Or the boards in those days would have been raising property taxes.
So something to think about. On the June 15th question, I looked it up. We have a Port Authority meeting that morning. If you want to combine a Port Authority meeting and a workshop, we could start with the CIP. I'd rather do it in the morning too, but we got a Port Authority meeting, so that would have to be considered, whether or not you want to change that or put that on a regular agenda like we've done in the past, but that's
I could work with,
difficulty of doing it June 15th in the
I'll
morning.
talk to Carlos about doing that, see what he says. Ed?
Ed, did you see any other?
Who was going to say that?
I could work with Mary Ann and the staff to see if there's any other date that we could put another workshop in. I know we don't like Fridays and Mondays, but
Yeah, well, that's just what's happening, June 15th in the morning. I just wanted to say that. Okay. Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm trying to absorb this budget, to be honest with you. Where will we get the information on the CIP plan, Mr. County Administrator?
I believe you would get that at the beginning of next week.
Okay, and the department head's budget,
I think the revised decision units you would get at the end of this week.
so we don't have them right now. Okay. Let me make sure I understand what I have so far. You are recommending that we give fund 10 additional law enforcement officers, their vehicles and equipment for Manatee County Sheriff Office.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Over your last 3 budget years, have you ever made that recommendation?
Yes, sir.
Every year.
Every year.
No, I clearly remember a debate where we was fighting for Sheriff Stubbe for additional deputies and we didn't get them.
We didn't give,
I voted for it, so I know.
yeah, we didn't give them all of them.
Correct.
We gave them additional deputies every
I believe
year
it was
that I've been here.
4.
Board did.
The board did. I believe it was 4 or something to
Out
that.
of,
Yeah, we took it out of
Our
something.
reserves,
At our reserve. That's why I'm asking this question.
yeah.
It was a debate in the board. It was no recommendation. It was recommendation not to fund it because Sheriff Stubbe met with us complaining. So this is why I'm asking about the 10 recommendation. It's difficult for me to absorb this because I don't see the department head's budget, the CIP. I'm looking at the recommended budget dealing with the constitutional officers. See, it's very difficult for me not seeing our budget for the department heads versus we've already approved, well, it's a recommendation, 4% across the board for the Constitution. I have yet to see the department head's budget. So as I look at this budget,
I think I see what he's missing.
and even the healthcare part that we're talking about, I think all that needs to be revisited. There got to be reasons why certain, because I'm hearing, I love Manatee Memorial Hospital, but I'm hearing stuff about them also not submitting information. So what do we submit, what we don't submit? So that's what's confusing me. Is one more severe than the other that we ask, and it's not severe in what we're getting? So I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about the rating. So are we punishing people from the healthcare because we're asking for certain documentation, which that's not the big issue, and you have the other individuals being funded not dealing with certain things that they should be dealing with. So,
Centerstone.
yeah, so I'm concerned. This budget here is very difficult with the recommendations by the county administrator, which he has authority to do this. This is only my third year, but I can tell you, these are some bold recommendations that I haven't seen the last 2 years. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Whitmore?
Well, this is the administrator's budget. In this budget, it includes all his departments. What you saw, what they submitted, what they want versus what they don't want is what we will be seeing, correct?
I think you've seen all of their department budgets. We've sent you all the decision units. There's
It was all
900
sent to us,
pages.
every bit of
Yep.
it.
Sent when?
6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I was not told that was the final budget.
What is
It
it?
was a draft.
This, okay, I got the floor. This is
Yeah,
the
I thought I had the floor
No,
talking
you
to the
don't.
county administrator, asking
No.
questions.
Oh, I stopped.
Okay.
Commissioner Whitmore?
Yeah, this is the administrator's budget.
Asking
He's
for
got,
comments.
is everybody done laughing? Okay.
Commissioner Whitmore has the
He's-
floor.
Oh, sorry.
He's gotten everything, what input from the department heads, and this is his budget. He's told us at this dais that we will go over it at a work session and go for it if we want to change it. This is his budget. That's his constitutional authority, is to present us with a budget. And if we want to change it, fine. That's the way it is in every other governmental agency in the country, in the state of Florida. The healthcare thing.
Really?
Please,
Please.
no comments,
I wasn't aware of that, Commissioner.
Please.
time, and no comments, or we will adjourn the meeting and come back when people can stop making comments when they're not called
Madam
upon.
Chair, I had the floor.
No, you did not.
Why I didn't? I asked a
Because you
question,
stopped, and I went to Commissioner
but I
Whitmore.
asked a question to the county administrator.
No, you did not, and he answered the question. Then you asked another question after Commissioner Whitmore had the floor. We will talk one at a time, push your buttons, one at a time. Otherwise, if we cannot follow our own procedures, we'll adjourn. That's how it'll work.
Okay, transparency, healthcare. I have talked to Real Health personally, Patrick and Dr. Colgate. I have talked to Dan Friedrich personally and asked him why they wouldn't sign up for the HIE, because we as commissioners voted to be transparent and show where we were spending our money, and we wanted more information instead of just writing a blank check. And that is a policy set by the board. Blake Corporate wouldn't allow it. Even though they have one hospital in the Panhandle that has the HIE, the corporate wouldn't allow Blake to do it. Rural Health did not want their information public. And you can talk to Patrick about it, you can talk to Mickey, and you can talk to Dr. Colgate, because that's what they've told me. I'm a patient of Rural Health, so, and I go to Rural Health. But I'm telling you, that's why they aren't given the money, because they did not want to follow our board's policy to be more transparent and sign up for the HIE. Again, this is the administrator's
I may
budget. This is
respond,
not
Madam
the
Chair.
board's budget yet. You will get the budget, we will take it up to the floor, and if you want to change it, fine. But this is him presenting our budget, just like every other administrator in the state of Florida.
Commissioner Ball.
Yeah, Ed, I want to thank you for presenting this to us today, and I realize it's the first step. I think what Commissioner Smith is referring to, we will really get into the nuts and bolts when we get into the decision review, or the decision unit review. That's when I'm sure that we'll all have a lot of questions and look at changing a lot of things perhaps that have been done in the past. Right now, I don't really care about the medical. I mean, I read what Commissioner Benak, I had already read that. I don't care about the HIE. I don't care about anything along that line. Right now, I'm looking at our budget. I was very interested in your presentation about putting money aside for the hit that I'm sure that we'll take in 2020. And I'm glad to see that, because I was wondering how you were going to look at something along that line. And we'll have to, like I said, when the decision units are discussed, and I don't have the dates in front of me, sorry. I can look right quick.
That's June 13th.
Thank you. June 13th. That, Commissioner Smith, I think that's when we will be getting all the answers that you're looking for and making changes to the budget that's been presented. That would be our time. Yes, this is the time for the county administrator in most counties, not all, but in most, to do this, and I thank you for that.
Yeah, and this is a tough budget, as every budget that I've ever participated in always has been. We've always had a significant request from the sheriff ever since I've been here because of the growth, and we hear from our constituents their concerns about that as well. And we funded quite a few things, so I'm appreciative that we have a recommendation for 10 additional spots, but we know we have additional deputies. I shouldn't say spots, additional deputies. But we know, we've heard from our employees. We know that Public Works has significant challenges. We know that our bus drivers are not getting paid much. But we also heard, and I read the article in the paper yesterday about the State Highway Patrol. They're not being funded by the state, so we're required to pick up the slack at the local level, and that's what Sheriff Wells said. And it was a pretty timely article. I was also fascinated by the fact that in Texas, a state highway trooper makes $73,000 a year in Texas. And here they make $33,000 a year. So the fact of the matter is that we have people that are not making enough money basically to live, and that is what we're dealing with, and it's a very difficult situation. We can't keep bus drivers, but it can't be just us alone. The state has got to help, and I don't want to be politically incorrect, but we just can't keep saying at the state level that local people, you cut your taxes and you pick up the slack, because at the state we're not going to do anything. So there you go. I'm being politically incorrect. I'm probably saying that, but
You're
it's
talking to
frustrating.
the microphone.
I am talking into the microphone.
Preaching to the choir here.
In regards to healthcare, people have asked me, what we need is a public hospital like we've had in the past. Well, let's see somebody come up with an offer to buy Manatee Memorial. We'll see how that goes. We have a different situation here when it comes to health care, and we have to deal with what we have. We don't have a public hospital that's subsidized like Sarasota is to the tune of $60 million. Perhaps they have better health care there because of that. Y'all ready to pass a tax to tax for health care?
I think
have a
we tried
hospital
that
tax?
3 years ago.
Well, this is a little bit different. Sarasota, as we know, has a millage, a special taxing district that pays for that hospital. So I think it's important when we talk about the challenges of healthcare that we deal with the facts we have, the situation we have. And it isn't so easy as just to say, well, gosh, we need a public hospital. As far as I can tell, nobody's willing to fund one here. So we have to deal with a unique situation. I personally think it's been amazing, the way that we've been able to work with our partners to deal with healthcare. I heard questions about Centerstone. I'm sure at some point, are we going to get more of a presentation on the healthcare breakdown? That always seems to be a question. There were questions at our workshop. I know Commissioner Smith, and I heard Robin mention it here.
The answer would be yes.
Centerstone and how that fits into that 6.9. And we also know that Manatee Memorial was looking to make back up the money that went out for the LIP. So I think we're going to need at some point more information on the healthcare and how it gets done. But we got to deal with, the reality that we have here. So I hope we'll get that information at some point.
Keyword, reality. Thank
know.
you for
Well,
using that.
Try to live in reality.
Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This commissioner was not referring to specifically Blake and Manatee Rural Health. Have not spoke to them about this at all. We have individuals that come into our office and meet with most of us with information that we was not aware of what I was speaking of. And this is why this commission is gonna look at the entire budget of all these entities, what they get come in on a yearly basis, not what we submit out. And that's why I make those statements from that standpoint. Certainly Manatee County Rural Health and Blake Hospital, in which I state again, I have not spoke with them concerning this issue and why they wouldn't submit anything to Manatee County government. I'm specifically talking about our total budget and what the revenue that comes in versus private and public businesses. That's what I'm speaking in reference, that receive funds from this government agency. I understand some get upset when you talk about hospitals, and I want a hospital north of the river. As some of my colleagues remember, we had a powerful person in Washington, D.C., kind of mentioned to us that if you had something else, you would have more competition here, and we may even have to look at counties such as Sarasota. So I'm just laying everything out in the public forum, transparent. And so when I question something about healthcare or law enforcement, I'm looking at the last 2 years that I was here and certain policies that I voted for, maybe right or wrong. And that's what I'm questioning. But I'm not going to be silenced and and think about what I'm saying, because you don't know what I'm saying. Individuals meet with most of us, and some of us, they say they waste their time to meet with certain people. So that's the information that I'm talking about. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. DiSabatino.
I don't totally understand exactly what you're talking about, but I'm sure it will come out. I just read in the paper yesterday that this Sarasota County did a huge
I was
audit
gonna bring that up.
and regarding the homesteaded property and found $82 million, and I think I sent you all the link. So
76 million, yeah.
76 million. That
Explain, I didn't read it.
Yeah,
it was.
what are you
They
talking
did a
about?
special audit regarding homesteaded properties and determined that they found 76 million in property taxes that weren't taxed accordingly. They were claiming the homestead exemption and they weren't entitled to it.
Just brought it up.
So,
Good job.
So hopefully, maybe we can get that information and utilize that, because, I've said it before, our taxes go a long, long way. You see with our whole budget of over $1 billion, we're down 119 million. So you get a whole lot of government for your money. And if you analyze your tax bill, even though everyone complains about having to fork it out once a year, I understand that, but if you break it down, all the line items, from the fire districts to this and that, are way more together than what you're paying for government for all the services. We are a really low tax state, we are a really low tax county, yet people want more and more services, or they want to keep up services, but they don't want to pay. And I totally get that. People are on fixed incomes and they can't, and I totally understand that. I really would like us to step up a template for the MSTUs. We only have a few, and if we stepped up that template and approached the different neighborhoods, then it would be another funding stream, a few dollars on each tax bill, to beautify the area surrounding the neighborhoods. And I'm sure that all the people that I've spoken with, from Cortez to the Manatee County line, one way or to the other in the district, would be supportive of a few more dollars on their tax bill in general to beautify their neighborhoods. So again, that would be an extra funding stream. At the workshop the other day, we discussed, I think Commissioner Ball, Smith, and I were volleying back and forth about for-profit organizations that get funded by the county, that they need to become transparent, or more transparent. And because I know, like Rural Health, I believe, there were articles years ago, a lot of people on their board of directors get really nice salaries. And so that's something that we need to make public And if they want money, they need to share it. If they don't want to share it, and my motto became the other day, if you want us to give it out, you need to give it up. So, Center Stone, and
I'm laughing. Oops.
so also there's, once we get down into the weeds in the different departments, I'm just throwing this out now so you're aware, I really need us to analyze the animal services budget and things like that. That needs, I've been hearing some things lately, that needs to come to our attention of what's going on there. Of course, it's summertime, and we don't know what happens at that time. And so I appreciated the constitutional officers coming before us last week. They gave up their day before the holiday vacation. Of course, the sheriff said he's never on vacation. And,
He's not here today, I see.
yeah. So it was a good book of their budgets. If anybody needs a copy, we have it. That's all for now, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Johnson.
You remember?
Just, a couple things. First of all, Ed, thank you very much for presenting this, and I know, I'd say, having never done it from a governmental standpoint, always been in the private business, but I think it's a good start. I think your idea of setting aside some money each year to get ready for the fall off the cliff in 2020
The inevitable.
needs to do, we need to keep looking at it. And I think the fact that it would appear to me that we haven't looked at doing any more bond funding during this period, so we're going to continue to be able to pay off some of the outstanding bonds that we have. And if my math is right, we've got 8 more meetings, and at our average county meeting of 7 hours, we'll have 56 hours to continue to dissect this thing to death and hopefully get everybody on the same page, so that we're all in agreement as to what we're going to finally end up with when we have to vote on it. And again, I'm looking forward to the process, and I hope you and all the department heads can hang your heads high for the next 56 hours over the next several months.
And we'll try to do the same, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
They will be receiving today what's recommended in the budget. They're as interested as you are.
I bet.
Thank you.
Right.
Commissioner Ball.
Yeah, first of all, sometimes up here I do laugh, and it's not laughing at a commissioner. It's just trying to keep things light, and you can't get bogged down, and you can't let stuff get to you, because if you do, it's just going to hurt your health.
And you turn gray.
And I
8
turn
years.
gray, and then more hair dye, so it just doesn't pay. So basically, I just,
Blonde.
thank you. Yeah. It's just to keep things light up here and to try and keep everybody okay. We talk about, let's go back to the hospital with Sarasota Memorial. They get an ad valorem, they're a public hospital. Our citizens voted, 3 years ago, not to increase the sales tax. I don't know, maybe we ought to ask them if they want to do put it on as an ad valorem item on their real estate tax bill. I don't know, but I think we need to remember that, the people did speak. They did not want their tax dollars going to healthcare. Whether or not we agree with it or not's irrelevant. That was the people that vote for us, and we spend their money. So, maybe it's something we should, put out on the 18 election. It wouldn't cost any money to ask them if they want to do an ad valorem. I don't know. I've brought it up before. We keep taking money out of the general fund, and we can't continue with the growth rate that we have to do it. And you keep doing the same thing every year, and it's not going to be something that we can continue with. So I think it might be a good idea to ask them if they want to put it as an ad valorem item. The other thing, getting back to what Robin brought up, I read the article. I had pulled it up on my phone to speak about it, but Robin got to it first. It was $76 million that they found in new taxable value, 550 cases of homestead exemption fraud, and this was all just in Sarasota County. They've already received $8.3 million back from some of the 76 million that they found. So I did send an email wanting to know if we considered doing something along this line. You know, it might be worthwhile considering what we're looking at. I mean, you know, I've already received an email from a resident in Lakewood Ranch asking if Manatee was going to do the same thing since Sarasota County had. Good point.
Was it the tax collector? Is that who did the audit?
You know, I don't, hold on a minute, let me see if it says. I'm sure probably the clerk's office had to be involved.
It said it was
I'm looking down.
Property appraiser.
Property appraiser's office.
property appraiser's office. Okay.
And then they had an auditing firm as well. So, anyway, you know, for me, this budget this year, yes, I look at the budget this year totally different than I have in the past. You know, I think our staff members have gone through a lot, and I have a lot of people look at me and say, you know what, but they get a 4% increase a year. No, they don't. You know, the money's out there for a 4%, but that doesn't mean that all the staff receive a 4%. They're given evaluations. So the money is there for when they get their evaluation to get an increase. But, you know, Ed, I'd really like to know how many of those employees have received a full 4%. I don't know if you know, have that information available like that, but I know that not all employees have received 4%. And we talk about compression, and I know I looked at it in your report that you just gave us, and you're saying $3 million last year is what the compression was. We hit it with $500,000, $500,000, and that's what you're recommending this time. That's, how can we get ahead of if we keep only doing $500,000, and 2 years ago and last year you said it was $3 million, you know, it's going to increase as time goes by, particularly now with the economy the way it is. So many people, we're losing so many people going to the private sector. And I realize that, you know, sometimes it's okay, but sometimes when you're losing really technical people who's been with this county a long time and knows what's going on, it's kind of hard to replace those people. And I know I hear it. I know I was having a conversation in the building department with John Barnott on that. I asked him about it not long ago. So I'm just curious as to, you know, I think this year we really should be looking at infrastructure. Huge. I mean, I hear that from the people. Infrastructure, roads, congestion, and also our staff. It's time for them. You know, we've passed them up so many times. I mean, look what just happened with Public Works. Right. So, you know, that concerns me. When are we, or when, I'm not going to word it like that. Mr. County Administrator, when do you feel it's time to really address those issues and do something about them?
As I said in my opening remarks, it's a new day dawning. This is the first time you have the opportunity to look long-term. I said earlier today to some folks, if you're thinking of a boating analogy, you're in a boat and it's sinking, and all you're doing is bailing water. It's hard to think about the port of calls that you might want to go to when all you're doing is bailing water.
Exactly.
That is consuming reserves that we've done. You didn't have the opportunity to think long-term strategies when all we were doing is trying to keep our head above water for the last 10 years. Now that that's over with, you have the opportunity now, starting now, to start looking long-term. And those issues I brought up to you at the beginning of my remarks. Where's the next major road after you finish 44th and after you finish Fort Hamer? What's the next big road that we're going to work on? And employee issues, how are we going to your point, how are we going to be able to retain a quality workforce? It's not something in a one-year budget. It's a strategy that's going to take multiple years to deal with. One of the issues is our benefit package was put together, I don't know when it was put together, 20 years ago, 25 years ago? It may have fit the bill then, but is it the benefit package that employees, in trying to recruit employees, they want today? We ought to go back and take a look at that benefit package and see if there's some way that it needs to be tinkered with, changed a bit, so that we have benefits that rival private and public entities across the state. It's time to take a look at it. Do another pay study. We did one pay study, compensation study, back in '08. The one before that was 25 years earlier. And the one in '08 that we got the results in, and we couldn't do anything about it. We didn't have any money. We were laying people off. That's the only compensation study we did for your workforce.
Ed, if I may, Madam Chair, didn't we do Evergreen? And that wasn't done in '08. That was done more recently. You mean, yeah, 11 or 12. No, I was on the board at the time.
We did a little partial study. We haven't done a complete study since '08. We didn't have the money to do it.
That was a
Okay. You know, you had some good points, and yes, I do agree.
But
that
you
we
can't
need
do
to
it all in
look-
1 year.
No, we do need to start looking at benefits, because I'll tell you what I hear from people. And by the way, I didn't mean to call out John Barnott. I also talked to Mike Gore and Ron Scholhofer about their departments, and I talked to those three only because they're the largest departments in the county. But I also hear from staff, different people that are employed by the county, that benefits are wonderful, but they don't put food on the table. And I've heard that more than once, that exact thing. So I'm
People
glad
earn a
that,
lot of leave days here, but they can't take them off.
yeah, I'm
So
glad
what
we're
good
going
is
to be
it?
looking at that, because I think it's time. I think our staff, the employees here at the county deserve it. They do a great job. I mean, I get great letters from citizens where they've interacted with county staff, and it's always so positive and so good. They try so hard, and you know, they're really proud, most of them, and you hear it when we have people that are retiring or coming up here to receive an award. They're proud to be employed here at the county. They love Manatee County. So I think they've been through some very, very hard times, and I think this is the year where we really need to look to take care of them. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Trace.
This, of course, is my first budget, and I'm very impressed with the level of service that y'all have been able to do with what y'all have to work with. This commissioner would love to see, after this budget process has gone through, have a work session with looking at new streams of revenue. We need to start thinking ahead in the future, not in this budget. I think we should get an expert in here and discuss how can we have other streams of revenue. Just as a person, first time.
Yeah, are you done?
I am.
Yeah,
Short and sweet.
we did go
With gray
through
hair.
some of that when we were looking at the sales tax. We did look at some of the revenue options before the sales tax went through, and you probably were not intimately involved with that because you were running for office during that time, so there were.
That does
some-
seem to come into play, doesn't
Yes,
it?
does.
I know.
Takes up some of your time.
No.
I've noticed that. So that would be good stuff to talk about again. I just had a couple notes listening to my different commissioners. One, Commissioner DeSabatino said, step up the template for MSTU. And it's interesting, I was talking with someone this morning just about that, about how you see some neighborhoods are willing to fund additional monies to make their medians look really nice. And then others don't. And you can't, the county can't come in and do that. That would not be fair for the people that are spending their tax dollars, either it be a CDD like it is in Lakewood Ranch or a MSTU like it is in Palm Air. And I recall the difficulties sometimes with setting up an MSTU that some of the neighborhoods run into is there is a cost associated with having the government collect your money and then, you know, putting it back out. There's a cost. You know, anytime money changes hand, there's going to be a cost. Our bankers should probably know that pretty well. So that I like the idea of having a workshop and talking about it and seeing what opportunities there are, MSTUs, MSBUs, the difference. I think we do it every once in a while, but we definitely need to talk about that to see if folks might want to, you know, take more control where they don't have it in the newer neighborhoods like they do in Lakewood Ranch. Some of the older neighborhoods, or even some of our most recent ones that might be missing some things.
We could invite Ray Sandrock from Charlotte County, and they have a lot of MSTUs and BUs, and talk about, from his perspective, the pluses and minuses of setting those up. But case in point of how they operate.
and maybe there's much better, her literal comment, I wrote it down, was step up the template for MSTU, so I think that'd be a good thing to discuss, what is the template for setting up an MSTU? And then, listening to Commissioner Baugh, when we see all the folks come down here from Public Works, and we see them, one of the common jokes is about how gray everybody is, and how balding they are, and they've been with the county for, 19 years, and we see the retirement, and that's reality.
Yes.
We've got a lot of people that have been longtime employees, they've stuck around, they've gotten small raises the last few years, but they're sticking around because they know that retirement is coming.
That's right.
How about attracting some of those younger people? They're not worried about retirement. They're not looking at that as a great benefit.
It's
And
called putting food on the table.
that's right, and they've got some great opportunities. And while everyone says, well, maybe government should just cut back, really? You really want your level of service cut back that much? It's something we're gonna have to think about. Because when I see the people that are so grateful when we respond to their issues with their roads, their utilities, they're grateful because they need those things. And the idea that at some point, like the highway patrol, that we're just not gonna have enough people to do that because we can't hire them, that seems like a very short-sighted.
One of the graphs we've had in the budget document over the years is employees per thousand population. And that's going down. You mentioned the state and state troopers, but in our own workforce, as the population grows and we maintain the same workforce, the number of employees per population is going down. So our ability to serve is being reduced.
That's right.
I mean, it's a real issue. And the other thing that I think would be helpful, because it keeps coming up, is, and it's come up ever since I've been up here, is this funding for a private corporation. And there's got to be some examples, and I wonder, when we were doing our research on healthcare, I'd like to know kind of how it goes in other jurisdictions where corporately owned hospitals are receiving taxpayer money.
Yeah, check
And
with
some of
Charlotte County on that one.
Yeah, some of the criteria they put in place, or protections or problems they've had, government shouldn't be inventing,
The end of
Yeah.
June, I'll be visiting with all the other county administrators. I'll put that one on the
I
table.
think that would be helpful for us to have, because,
Yeah.
the bottom line is, we have one safety net hospital here in Manistee County, and, we can cut all the funding out, and what does it mean if we were to do that? I think we need to look at that carefully, and I need to understand how we can do it better, if we're gonna do it at all.
You are in the board of the 15th largest county by population. I'll check with the 14 larger.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner DeSabatino?
Yeah, that segues into what I was going to bring up about working with the other county administrators and other counties. When you meet with them, if they have the same concerns about the extra exemption coming forward and less
They
money in there, maybe we all need, as 67 different counties, to band together and petition the legislature to unring the bell.
I'm
Can vote to reconsider it.
I'm pretty sure that when I get there, what I presented today is going to be in everybody's mind, because most of them don't present the budget to their board until July 15th. They won't have presented how they plan to deal with that issue
You
when we
can all-
meet the end of June.
But I'm sure they've all spoken about it, and all the other commissioners have
So they
spoken about
have.
it. We need to get en masse
Yeah.
to undo this, because, if it's a difference of $4 a year per household or per different households, and I'm sure it ramps up because Ed will pay the most, as we know, and then Vanessa, then, as we discuss in workshops. But you multiply that times 100 and some thousand
Yes.
residences, and that's real money. So that's where we are. Thank you.
Commissioner Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To Commissioner DeSabatino, she's talking about you have the special districts that you can create, Miami-Dade County and West Palm Beach, A lot of county have certain areas where it's a special district where you can do the things you're talking about. It don't have to be countywide. Special district, even your CRAs and TIFs, downtown development, special overlays. So that can be done from that standpoint. Get back to Commissioner Barr, was talking about this referendum, and that conversation was a very important conversation, dealing with possibilities of funding. One of the things that I hear when I go to FAC is the different, which is great, and hopefully next year we can change the meetings where others can go.
Yeah, we need to talk
But
about that.
That is huge with information.
Yeah.
Getting from other county government, county commissioners, procurement procedures and different stuff that's out there that comes there. But to the point of this budget process that we have here, it's a very tough situation. Even dealing with the, and I'm not advocating cutting medical monies based on that, but I think this year here, the procedure needs to be a little different than it has been. I've been committed to making sure that the employees of Manatee County government are paid a decent salary, and so I have concerns about that. So when I advocate on recommendations, it's based on the fact that I don't know what our employees are actually getting. And I think Commissioner Bob made an excellent point. Let's say someone's getting 4% every year. If certain employees did get the total 4% 4 years in a row, that's 16% increase, if they received it now,
Yeah, I don't think
what
they
I'm
have.
saying. And we've been consistently looking out for the constitutionals. And my concern is the people in this building and work out there and bust their butt and digging ditches,
Hello.
who we don't hear from and only see them during a hurricane or when they come up and get a reward. Those are the ones that I'm concerned about, to be honest with you. And I'm concerned about all people in general. But to hear some of our employees, and they talk to me too, we're going to end up being a training ground. Come here, and it's, some of them already saying that. Go to get 3 years experience at Manatee County government, and then we'll hire you. And they get a substantial increase when they come here.
That's what it used to be at the sheriff's department.
Absolutely.
Not that many years ago.
That's what it used to be in the city of Palmetto with law enforcement. 3 years certificate, come there 3 years, then they go to Hillsborough, Tampa, and everything else. They get their foot in the door. So this is what Manatee County is going to turn into. So I know our directors probably can't say it, but, talk is cheap. We talk and talk, but they want action. They want to protect their employees and make sure that they have a 3-year plan, no matter what the homestead exemption, where they can look at them in the eyes and be able to make a commitment to them, where they can stand by their word with their employees and not backtrack. That's what the directors don't want to do. If you tell them something you're going to do, they want to be able to go back to that man or woman and say, I promise you I'm going to do this, but they don't need us reneging on something that we've told them in confidence that we're going to do.
That's right.
And so that's what I'm pushing for. So I'm compassionate about questioning everything this year. And I've said this over and over again. You don't take care of home, somebody else will.
That's right.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Whitmore.
Charlotte County, I talked to the people in administration there because I'd heard about this deal that we heard, that they don't have an indigent care, they don't have indigent care fund they pay. Well, what I heard from the staff is, and there was a physician there too that actually confirmed it, who's on the FAC board, that they see their patients in the hospitals, they stabilize them, they discharge them, and then I heard the various entities send them to Sarasota County. Sarasota County has a hospital at the south end, and I actually read something in the paper about they were complaining in the last year. They send them to a hospital down there, then they're treated because they have this indigent care fund. And and this is not my world, this is Karen and Ed's world, there's some kind of intergovernmental fund where Charlotte County has to pay back Sarasota for taking care of the indigents. And that happens all the time. When our residents go to other counties, the same thing happens. We have to pay for them. So, but I heard that that's how they handle it, which is fine, but that's just how they handle it. And I'm sure, I did hear from 2 administrative staff people there when we were in Tallahassee that had told me that. I am going to continue answering my texts. My husband's in the hospital, one of those hospitals. He's going to have surgery, and I'm waiting for a surgeon to call me, so.
Say he's having surgery?
Yes, when I'll know when a doctor lets me know,
When did he fall?
this morning.
Oh.
So, I'm not gonna put my phone on silence. I have a question, Ed, I'm glad Nick's here, because I heard it during the session.
He has all the answers.
Yeah.
All right,
I
finally.
heard, and I know we talked about the
Man with the
at the
plans.
dais here, but we talked about so much that it, I kind of, I heard we were kind of being punished, the counties. There was 20-something counties haven't raised their taxes in 10 years, or during the recession. And so there was something that was coming before the session, and maybe Vanessa would remember it because she's been involved a lot this year, but we were being punished because we didn't raise our millage, so there was something, I forgot what they did, or they were thinking about doing it. Maybe it was this tax exemption. None of us spent, they said we should have taxed our citizens.
And then they'll put a
Commissioner
free-
Whitmore, I don't remember hearing anything in Tallahassee that we were being punished for anything that I heard.
I haven't heard anything.
Okay,
well,
somebody
Harry-
was-
We heard it here.
we heard it at the
Mr.
dais.
Smith.
Oh, okay, I knew I
I'm
heard
going to
it.
let you respond here to what Commissioner Whitmore said, 'cause I did hear it here at the dais from you.
I haven't
At
heard it.
our,
Drink or smoke, so I knew I heard it.
at our,
I don't have clear mind so far.
as you know, when they was talking about moving forward to vote for this bill at our fight conference in Gainesville, during our class, they asked for us to yield and call senators about don't support the homestead exemption.
Oh, yeah, I
It
did
is
hear
a
that.
And the fact
exemption.
that they say,
Okay.
no, you're not, you're saving money, you're not increasing your millage, and some of you have refused to do it over a period of a year. Nick Maddox is the second vice president of the State Board Association of County, and that was his presentation to us, and quite a few more stated it. The people carrying the bill said, when the last time you increased your millage?
10
And
years.
we're not, a lot of you haven't done it, they had the data showing they haven't done it over a period of time, and they say, well, you got to make the tough decisions, you're not making it, and you want us not to do our job.
Right.
That's how it came back. He made it clear to us that it was going to pass.
And now we've got this thing going, so it did, that's how the sausage was made up there.
So it sounds.
Okay, I thought I heard it.
Kindness who had not over a period of time, and so you're asking for us not to do it, but we're checking to find out, and we see kindness
Did you
that
say there was
not.
going to be a moratorium on any increase, that we wouldn't be able to increase it?
Well, I don't know where that came from. No, they're saying you haven't, so we're gonna do what we gotta do because you haven't done it locally.
Well, I knew I had heard it up here. Commissioner Whitmore, are you
it.
done?
Yep.
Commissioner Ball?
Yeah, I'll start with that one, the homestead exemption. I might remind my fellow commissioners that next year, 2018, is an election year, and you have someone very powerful in Tallahassee who's looking to run, I think, perhaps for governor, which is where this really all started and came from. I don't think that anyone, to my knowledge, has been, any county has been punished. And I don't want the voters, the taxpayers, the citizens here in Manatee County to go after State Rep Jim Boyd or State Rep Joe Gruters or Senator Bill Galvano, because I don't think that that was the case. And I can tell you, we got people in leadership who's going to make sure that Manatee County is not held responsible for something along that line. The homestead exemption, it sounds good, particularly if you're going to run for office. Look what I did. I got it before the voters. I got you more homestead. Vote for me. I'm great. So come on, politics is out there, and it is what it is, and that's why I hate politics, because it's not right. Getting back to Charlotte County, I can tell you that I spoke with State Representative Michael Grant. I also spoke to a couple of the commissioners at Charlotte County, and they do not pay any funds toward indigent care. However, yes, it is true, just like every county in the state of Florida, if a citizen of Manatee County is visiting Orlando and they get ill and they can't afford to pay, then you know what? Orlando sends us a bill. And that's how it's done throughout the entire state. I know what Commissioner Whitmore was talking about when she said that, Charlotte County sends everybody to Sarasota. That came back not to be true. There was an investigation done on that. And it came back that that was not the case. So the bottom line is, not all counties do it the same. And we do it differently than some other counties in Florida. I brought up Charlotte County only because I had spoken to several people there. So, we need to remember, and we have some commissioners up here, I think 3 that are running for reelection, and trust me, I just went through it. I know what it's like. The last thing, FHP, Florida Highway Patrol. I am astounded that, okay, I gotta be careful. I am astounded that they would vote to lower our homestead, which is great. I own a home, it's great. But dagnabbit, what about, the State Highway Patrol? I mean, they play a very, very important role in the state of Florida. So I am a little concerned about that, and I would, I would ask, and I would say this, and I've told a lot of citizens this, call your representatives, call your legislators, and ask about that, because we need to do something for the Florida Highway Patrol. I mean, we can compare that to Manatee Sheriff's Department, and we need to take care of them because they take care of us. Well, same thing with FHP. So, I would say call your legislators and have a discussion on that, because that's a pretty important department. I know that Highway Patrol works very closely with the Manatee Sheriff's Department and other county police departments and sheriff's departments. So call them.
I would suggest that same applies perhaps to Florida Department of Transportation, and their ability to maintain the roads in the state is deteriorating, and more you will find your local Public Works Department picking up the slack for some of what's happening in the FDOT arena.
Can I?
Mr. Boss, still has the floor.
I'm glad you brought up FDOT. We all know that, the DDI, the diverging diamond, has been put into place. I can tell you that the people out east that take that regularly are so excited because it's awesome. I can tell you, every time I go through, I laugh. Sorry, Carol, but I laugh because it's so great. It's worked out so well. So I know that in years past, I don't know what it's going to be this year, but I know in years past, FDOT has had a budget of $9 billion a year. And I know that they're doing a lot in our area. And we have a great relationship with them, thanks to a lot of members on this board. And, they need some kudos because they have really come through on many things. But I would love to see the governor increase their budget.
Yeah, it's the
$9
maintenance of
billion's a
the
lot,
existing
but-
roads. They're doing a lot for the building new stuff, but
Yeah,
It's
awesome.
Right.
Well, State Road 70, they just repaved that. So, in fact, I think it's
Start on
not even done.
64 next week.
They are. I
Yeah.
saw the sign today.
So yay for
After I
FDOT.
went through the Diverging Diamond, because I had a meeting out in Lakewood
Isn't it
Ranch this
awesome?
morning.
It's awesome.
Pretty cool. Commissioner Smith.
Yes, Madam Chair, I just wanted to mention, since we're talking about healthcare, and as you know, in Tallahassee was a bill that was going through to make it basically more easy to open hospitals up. If you try to open what rural counties got issues with the distance of hospitals,
Certificate of need.
certificate, and they're trying to make it, no, I don't know what happened with it, but as you know, if you try to open up one, you get sued, which we've been sued, but anyway.
Oh, yeah.
So that's an issue, and I know the rural counties are pushing that to make sure that they don't have to drive 50 miles to go to the hospital. I heard one person said they go to Fort Pierce, and Fort Pierce is 50 miles to go to a hospital. Could you imagine, so. All right.
North County.
Okay, well, lots been said, and I think this is a good first opening budget message. I think that a lot of stuff has been put on the table. I particularly like the idea of thinking longer term. I think it's going to be very important as we go forward. This board and previous boards, we've made some pretty good commitments to what we want to see done, improvements in the urban core. But as we've said, when we start looking at some of those sales tax, how do we get there? How do we make these improvements? Where do we invest? We've got significant issues has been said about needing to fulfill our grid road network. And we've got impact fees to do that. We've got some gas tax. We've never spent property tax dollars. So that's something that, again, we just can't make it clear enough. When people start looking at the budget, they automatically think, and we heard it just recently at the work session, you people have all the money in the world. Well, maybe not when you look at what the funds are, what they're limited to, and what our needs are. So need to remember that we don't spend property tax dollars generally on roads. It's funded by impact fees. And we also have a Parks Master Plan coming forward. And we've talked about some of the one-time funds, and I think that's going to be really important as we talk about parks, some of the demands that we've got, and talk about, how do we meet those, but that's a short-term thing, and I'd like us to also think about funding a little bit of a fund set aside, so. Okay, at this point, anything else, Mr. Administrator?
No, we will look forward to working with the board and coming up with a final budget by September.
Okay.
Public comment?
Yes, we're going to go to public comment. All right, at this time, I'm going to open it up for public comment. If you'd like to come forward and address the board, again, this is only a work session. Can't take any action, but we want to hear from the public. Come forward, state your name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Sandy Marshall, Federation of Manatee County Community Associations. Again, I'm glad I'm not a county commissioner. As you know, we have been involved monitoring your budget and attending workshops and then sending out a letter of recommendations and observations that we have accumulated through our committee to bring to your attention. There was a couple of things that I'll share with you by way of background information that might be of some help as you're going through your considerations on the budget this year. We have come a long way. I think our county administrators did an excellent job to kind of bring us up to speed of where we're at, as he has done in the past, and to also give us a view looking ahead. The idea of having a public hospital here, again, I think you need to keep in mind, for those of you that haven't been here, like I've been here 65 years, and Mrs. Trace has been here, born and raised, and I think Commissioner Smith, same way. So they know some of the history. That used to be a public hospital, Manatee Memorial. And the reason it was sold is we couldn't afford to keep it as a public hospital. And we obtained a nonprofit corporation, Baptist Hospital, somebody come in and bought it. And that's how they set up the trust fund. And that's how we had the trust money accumulate over time, and that was used to fund the indigent care, which was a great idea. And so the only thing I can suggest to you, I don't know that you're going to be able to convince the public that we ought to go to a public hospital at this point and then ask them to use ad valorem taxes to support it so you can pay for indigent care. I think that's going to be a hard sell. And the second hard sell is going to be to try to put another sales tax referendum on the ballot to try to get that approved. I think that's going to be a hard sell again, too, because the reason it's failed twice is because there was no plan. And we've got right now a health care committee, of which I serve on, as you know. And we've hired Josh Barnett, who is doing a good job. Joshua's a very bright young man. And he's supposed to be developing a plan. We've got a meeting tomorrow night that I'll be attending. We got rained out with the meeting last week. We were supposed to have it, so they got it scheduled for tomorrow night. And but before you're going to be able to sell sales tax or even ad valorem tax dollars to the public, you better show a plan of how you're going to handle that money, because that's been the problem. The money's been going out, the prices are going up, and people are not getting the service they need. And rural health has got an excellent operation here, but this business of not wanting to share, I don't understand that. Same thing true with Blake. We're all in this boat together, rowing down here, going downstream, and they need to work together. And so this is one of the things that Mary Ruiz, before she left Manatee Glen, said. We have a fractionalized system in this county of health care, and they need to come together. That's what was a part of the task force that I served on, was the final conclusion. And that's why the sales tax didn't pass then. So anyway, we'll get with you and we'll be at your workshops.
Thank you. Anyone else to address the board on the healthcare?
Good afternoon. Catherine Edwards.
Or not healthcare, I'm sorry, budget.
Yeah.
I
I don't know why I said healthcare. Oh, we just automatically go to healthcare, it's terrible. Budget. So
All right, so for the fourth year in a row, we have a request for a flat across-the-board salary increase. As Commissioner Smith said, it's really the people on the lower end of the spectrum that are really suffering the most, and it's why you've got a large turnover in people, for example, like with bus drivers. With 4% pay raise, I'd like to remind the commissioners that that's just the total cap, but people can get as much as a 5% pay raise. So the real problem is that it's a percent pay raise, because somebody making $100,000 gets a 4% pay raise gets $4,000. Somebody making $25,000 gets $1,000. Now, who can use that $4,000 more? Somebody making $25,000 or somebody making $100,000? And I think that the people who get the biggest dollar pay raise should be the people that get the lowest pay. And that will help address the problems that the county's running into with losing some of its lower paid workers. And a flat 4% pay raise across the board hasn't resolved this problem for 4 years, so I don't know why doing it again is going to resolve the problem. In addition, you have a human resources department that can't give you an analysis of the pay scales with the percentage pay raise that each pay scale got on average and what the benefits are that each of those pay raises, the people at each of those pay raise scales have elected. So without that analysis, how you can make any intelligent decisions on where to increase benefits and how to increase pay raises is beyond me. But it's conveniently divided so that human resources can't do that, because the benefits department is a completely separate entity in terms of data as opposed to the salary, which is handled by the Corporate Circuit Court. So you're coming up with this pay raise increase request. Meanwhile, we have a reserve fund that's decreasing, and is projected to be gone by next year, I think, if memory serves correctly. But we're giving away $3 million that the county had in hand for a reserve fund for a helicopter that wound up being funded by the half-cent sales tax. But the county gives us $3 million back to the sheriff anyway, and then it laments that it can't seem to find money for a pool that is in North County because it's in an incorporated area, but it's okay for the public safety and the sheriff to work in both incorporated and unincorporated area while using assets that were acquired with the half-cent sales tax. And I'm almost finished. So that kind of brings us to the old jail, where we have a chief judge who is signing a letter by the sheriff
your time is
where
up.
he fails to maintain impartiality, and you have a sheriff who's bent on sabotaging affordable housing initiative by the county commissioners. And so I ask you, yes, or tell you, please look at new streams of revenue, but look at improving efficiencies as well.
Thank you. Your time is up.
And,
Please take your
and bigger pay raises for the lowest paid. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else who'd like to address the board at this time? Okay. Seeing no one come forward, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment portion. Commissioner Baugh?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about something that Mr. Marshall said. I just wanted to mention that when I said what I did about ad valorem, I did not mention a public hospital. Because I agree with you. I know that we used to own the hospital. Manatee County did. I know it was very difficult financially on the county as a whole, and that's why it was sold. I knew that. Even though I've not lived here as long as you have, but I did know that. But that's why I did not say a public hospital, but we could still, I did check into it, and we could still do an ad valorem even though Manatee Memorial is privately owned. But saying that, you know, I should probably add that at this point, I would not be in favor of doing it until I receive financial records from the hospital, and they would have to be more open than what they've been in the past. But I think that might be the salvation if the community wants to keep providing for indigent care. Now and in the future, we're going to have to find a better source of funding, and it could very well be ad valorem. So, thank you.
Commissioner Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, to the point, I know that during the downturn, we talk about the downturn a lot. I hear it so much over here, I kind of sleep with it now. But anyway, during the downturn, when I was in government in Palmetto, we had nowhere near the number of employees here, but had a little over 200 employees in the city of Palmetto at the time. I think it's lower than that now. A lot of people are going into privatization also. But to Catherine's point, it came a time where we had to go in and make sure the people who was actually working received their raises. And we eventually had a scale where if you made X number of dollars, you was not going to get that hit like the ones out there was digging ditches and doing these different things. You were going to get an increase, I mean, automatically. The question was how much it was going to be, and as I mentioned, we also gave lump sum bonus for low-paying employees. You'd be amazed what $1,000 or $1,500 would do for someone at one lump sum. So we did all of that because employees started leaving, training. As soon as you train one, they get off probation, they got another job for $2 or $3 an hour, and they were gone. And so we was creative with that to maintain the job force here. We're going to need to do the same thing. Getting back to the jail situation, and I know Catherine sent us an email, all of us an email, about the jail and the old jail and the things what all of us went through to try to get that situation straightened out. As we heard presentations in our workshop the other day dealing with additional building space. For constitutional officers, you know we have the state attorney need additional space, and it's going. You hear the county administrator talking about a new jail, probably adding to a new jail. We're going to have to find a better way to run county government. I can't see myself extending buildings when you got the old jail sitting over there. And unless it be torn down or something done to it, I don't see myself investing in government buildings when that building is still sitting there. And whether we agree what took place or not, it's space. It's space. And I knew our county administrator have a plan, and we talked about it privately, and I'm gonna keep that privately, and whether he can move forward with that, I thought it was a good suggestion. It may be torpedoed already as I speak, but I don't know. But I'm just saying it was a suggestion that made common sense to me dealing with affordable housing. I was riding down yesterday and I seen people, elderly folks, 70-some years old, in wheelchair, homeless. Go down 14th Street sometime and talk to some of them. On Social Security, homeless.
Tough.
Living in wheelchairs. And, you know, I need a place to stay. You know, I got a little money. Getting robbed and beat. I mean, my God, what is government being made of? Our focus is on the wrong thing. The quality of life is suffering, and Commissioner Barr hit it. Road and infrastructure is big. I was in a meeting, and the first two questions came from two deputies in a neighborhood meeting talking about infrastructure and road. They can't even get the calls. Danger with their licensed sirens trying to get through traffic. It's an issue with law enforcement now. We know it's an issue with medical services, but it just didn't dawn on me that law enforcement trying to respond to a call. So all of these different things that we got going has got to be addressed. But, you know, we need to make sure that the decisions that we make are the best decision for the employees and not special interests at this point. We really do. And I think the county administrator mentioned we're the 10th fastest growing area. in the state right now, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. What's going to change is that we're going to lose a lot of employees, you know, and most of them speak well of the department heads, but, you know, they've stood for 4 and 5 years. It's hard to have a family with work schedules, and most living in poverty. So I just don't know. I just want to say that for the record. As I start looking through this budget process and some of the things that we need to do, and I keep hearing the same thing, and Commissioner Barr has stated, and Commissioner Bernanke has mentioned it too on several occasions, when you have requests for so much money, and at the same time, we must deal with the quality of life issues. Those are some tough decisions that we need to make. And certainly, Catherine, keep doing what you're doing. This commissioner was not afraid to question the chief judge, by the way, but I don't want you to think that. I deal with faith and courage all day long, so that wasn't an issue for me. And the statutes that you mentioned are correct. Dealing with that also, I don't want you to think that. I was just trying to make sure that we deal with the constitutions and property and things like that, like it should have been. But folks, we got to get some serious things done with affordable housing. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm done, so I may have a warrant issue when I speak to you. They can do it by internet now.
We'll bail you out. We know a good bail bond
I don't know, you
company.
might have to spend 24 hours in there, I don't know.
Yeah, I did.
My good friend, Mr. Marshall, will make sure I get out. He'll come stand for me.
All right. Well, I appreciate everyone being upfront about this, because we do have a lot of issues. And the issue of pay, I've kind of thought the same thing, you know, maybe I mean, I remember working here and seeing some of the pay that the people at the top were making and wondering, you know, why do they get raises? But I don't think it's as easy as that. If it was that easy, I would hope we would have done that we would have given the pay to the people at the lower end. I mean, you have to have people across the board in different positions. I don't think it's as easy, even though I like the idea. I agree 100%. When I listen to how some of our lower paid workers are barely making more than minimum wage, and they're working so long that they can't get a second job, that's just plain wrong. But I don't think it's quite as easy as that. I do appreciate the idea of looking at benefits, because, as was stated, just because you have all these days off, if you can't use them, what good are they? You can't cash them in. Wow. You know, it's kind of an old school way, and we've got to deal with our younger folks, and we have to deal with what they're expecting, and they're not, like I said, concerned about a retirement account. They're not even concerned about having family days off that much. They want to, you know, make enough money to be able to pay rent, which is tough in this town, very tough. I knew the jail would probably come up, so I did have a conversation with the administrator about that. You know, I've had a tour of that jail. I hope everybody has been inside that jail to see what it's like, and I can't help but think of the irony of putting the state attorney in the jail, but probably not something that they would look forward to for office space.
Not a bad idea. I'm going to tell Broski you said that.
That is a joke. That's why I said irony. But you know, it's tough. It would be very tough to turn that space into office space, and
Very tough.
and you know, the reason some of us got excited about the idea of affordable housing is because we had somebody who was willing to make an investment, private investment money, come in and do that. But it ran into some problems. Can we continue to work through those problems? But we, you know, the sheriff looked at using that space, had a study done, what could be done with that space, and the sheriff said they couldn't use it. They could not use it for storage. It was not built to a standard that could take that. So yeah, we do need to kind of cross off all the options. You know, office space, what would it take? Is it doable? Not. You know, we need additional space, so that's going to be an issue. And on the hospital, I want to make it clear, I was not suggesting that we have a new public hospital. I was saying people ask me, why don't we have a public hospital? And I know the history as well. You know, and it's tough, you know. It sounds like a good thing to have a public hospital and that could be invested in by the public, and I get that. But that's why I said we have to deal in reality. We have a privately owned hospital, but as I've said before, nobody asked McDonald's to feed them because they're a private corporation and there's people that are hungry out there. Nobody asks,
good point.
nobody asks Bell's to clothe everybody. You know, there's people that need clothing. So the idea that just because you're a private hospital that you have to provide healthcare, I'm pretty sure that their business model will not work if they have to take care of all the indigent healthcare without receiving any money from anywhere. So that's the reality that I think we have to deal with. But no, I would not entertain this commissioner would never vote to put a referendum on to increase the ad valorem tax to pay for indigent healthcare at the hospital. That's not something I would think of without a plan, and maybe that'll be something. I look forward to hearing what Josh has to say. You know, these are tough issues he's taken on, and I appreciate you all serving on the Healthcare Advisory Board and continuing this discussion, which, as we know, has been going on for at least the last 10 years, so appreciate that. Commissioner Whitmore.
Catherine, and you know, you spend a lot of hours doing research. We appreciate it. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we don't. The helicopter, I support. This is a capital plan that we have been working on for a year. This is a public safety issue. And I know it keeps getting brought up, but this commissioner is going to vote for that. And so, if it comes before us in our budget, which I know it will. So that is, you know, I keep hearing that there could be issues with it, and I respect your opinion, but I am going to support this helicopter. This is, we have to replace the other one, and it is totally a public safety issue. And when cars get old, equipment gets old, we have to replace them. So this is just another very important tool that our public safety needs for, you know, crime to help and to protect our public safety. So I am totally going to support that. And I am leaving.
Okay. Goodbye. Good luck.
Goodbye.
Surgery today or tomorrow?
I don't know.
All right, good luck. Our thoughts are with you guys.
Carl, hope everything's okay.
Yep.
You think I said it?
Commissioner Ball.
Ed, one more thing, just real quick. On the Evergreen test or study that you referred to,
Yes.
if it was done in '08, or even if you did a partial study in '11, it's still at least 6 years old.
Yes.
So my fear is that the 3 million that you were referring to as far as compression, it might be double that by now, if it's at least 6 years old. Do you know?
We stay in touch with them because every year we get a letter from them to talk about what portion of the 4% should be allocated to market equity adjustments on October 1 versus pay for performance on January 1. We break that up into two pieces. And they, several years ago, I don't remember exactly when, I think it was 3 years ago, made reference to this $3 million behind on this compression. And that's what we've been working with. We are in the process of working on obtaining some software where, rather than looking at compensation for every position across all 1,700 positions, we can buy some software that we can look at specific positions and then look at them in the marketplace. Those positions that we're having the highest turnover, and looking at the market for those positions to see if we can target them to do something specific, rather than looking at the entire universe of jobs and deal with them on a job-specific basis, and see if that can help us in dealing with our workforce issues. And along with that, we would like to look at the benefits and see if we can convert something into cash.
Thanks for that update. It was started bothering me when I realized it had been so many years.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Commissioner DiSabatino.
Great discussion. We're going back to the discussion of roads and connectivity, and I'm looking at Ron Schulhofer here and his team. I see a lot of the problem with wanting more north, south, east, west connectivity, and you get the problem with not in my backyard, and nobody wants you to take their property, but yet everyone wants more connectivity. And just for instance, the Fort Hamer Bridge took, 100 years almost. But recently, because of the citizens not wanting it, and they stalled the project for over 2 years, I believe, and costing more than $3 million in tax dollars, just because we had to,
It was impact fee dollars.
right, well,
Yeah,
it's
somebody paid.
tax money, somebody paid for it. So what I see is, the big divide between the residents, those that have lived here a long time, my two colleagues, and those that are newer here. We see that all the time, where people have been here forever, and they're here, and now nobody else can come. And so that's where the disconnect is.
But we will continue to collect impact fees for transportation in each of the 4 zones. And you have, in your comprehensive plan, the future land use map, you have adopted a long-range plan for what roads shall be converted from 2-lane to 4-lane, 4-lane to 6-lane. And as you move forward, you have to take a look at, based on current activity and development patterns, which would be the next road after we finish the Fort Hamer Bridge and 44th. Which road in each of those zones ought to be the next road that we, the staff, focus on and started acquiring right-of-way and then begin the design? And as I think Ron and his staff have pointed out to you, from the day you say this is the road we ought to work on to the day somebody actually drives on it could be 7 to 10 years. And so we ought to get about looking at what is the next road? Is it an east-west road? Is it a north-south road? But they're all identified. All it is which one of those is the one you might want to take a look at.
And also the problem is when the board changes and you get new commissioners on, then they want to take it off, and then the new board wants to put it back on, and
Well, that
happened with the
commitment,
44th several times.
once you start spending money, it really is difficult to stop. Because you've spent and invested a lot of taxpayers' money in acquiring right-of-way or doing permitting, doing design, and then to stop that and go do it somewhere else, you've in effect wasted all that money. And so,
And we see that on the study north of the river for a third bridge there. Money, it's on the table, it's off the table, it's on the table, it's off.
but we haven't done any design and permitting yet. We've done a lot of talking, but
A lot of talking, but
Yeah.
since all our talking, traffic's backing up, and our friends coming over the bridge aren't happy. Third bridge over to the island, a lot of talk about that, so,
it's a challenge. That's
it's a
right.
challenge, but I think, I see a lot of problem is, the divide in this county between, one side and another, and people who want things to stay the same versus people who have a vision of changing it, and somewhere in the middle needs to be a balance. And so
And that's
I
the-
think also, if I may, a couple of years ago, we took our show on the road and we visited the board went to each of the districts on community meetings, and I would like to see that again. I think that's really helpful because each commissioner is in their own district and they see what's going on, but it would be helpful if as a board with the clerk that we can all see what's going on in each district. I think that would be helpful. We did that a while ago.
Was it before 2012?
It must have been
Must
before
have
12,
been.
because I don't remember it.
I don't remember
Yeah,
that
we
either.
went out to Parrish, we went up north of the river, South County, yeah.
I remember a workshop
think-
that we all went to
In
at
the
the
parish
church.
overlay.
If I may respond.
Yeah.
So,
That's respond, Madam Chair.
and they can all be different types of meetings geared to the
I
different
think it's
zones.
brilliant what you're
Yeah.
talking about on the city commission. Every district, we do it every year. We take the commission meeting there.
Right,
And I think that's something with the 5 districts we ought to look at doing. And it's a full meeting, ask questions, but every year, January, the city of Palmetto does it.
Right, because we're all voted, 5 of us are voted in for the residents in the district and the 2 at large, but we all vote for every district, all 7 districts, which are 2 at large. So we need to see what's going on out in Parish as well as Lakewood Ranch, so you have an understanding of, exactly what you're voting for, because human nature might say, well, it's not my district, so it's not as important as something that's going on in my district, but maybe that would open up everyone's eyes to see how we can all assemble all the pieces together.
Mr. Ball?
Yeah, I just wanted to add when the conversation about transportation and bridges and so forth, I think all the commissioners had a meeting not long ago with FDOT about Palmetto, going from Palmetto into Bradenton, et cetera. Looks like that's going to be speeded up. Again, we've had a lot of conversation this board has with FDOT, and some of us were in Tallahassee and not on our deathbed at the time. And it has been moved up. So the thing of it is, though, Ed, in trying to pick out, I had this question, in trying to pick out the new road to do, shouldn't we wait to see how the traffic's going to flow from Fort Hamer, from the bridge, and how that's going to change the traffic flow as well as 44th? I mean, it's kind of hard to pick another road when we don't know.
Of Schulhofer and Saji, and I went to accounting school. You can ask those fellas.
Okay.
I'd love to answer it, but they'd get mad at me.
Yeah, I was thinking about it, that, we need to see what's going to happen with the traffic flow on those 2 main drags that we're doing right now to
Probably.
kind of get a feel.
Yeah, and I look forward very much to that discussion on the 15th about roads, because that's a big part of our CIP. And we're going to have that discussion on the 15th, and where we go, we know we have some significant projects coming forward, both public and private projects coming forward, that we need to work on and look at out in the future. Where do we go? We've spent so much money on the Fort Hamer Bridge and 44th, and, we need to know what it's going to take to finish those so that we can talk about what money is available. I just want to say just one other thing. I had the opportunity this weekend, because I was house sitting, to spend time out at Siesta Key. And we all know Siesta Key has been rated the #1 beach in the world. But boy, the challenges, I saw so many people on the beach. I saw people getting in fights over parking spaces. They've just expanded that beautiful parking lot. Just so overwhelming. It was, and everywhere you went was just, I'm not downplaying it, it's because of their success. It was just so jammed. And people parking in the right-of-way everywhere. This idea that, another bridge would solve the issue, we're going to have to get a little bit more creative than that, folks. And I saw all kinds of little, the churches were selling their parking lots, selling parking spaces there. They were packed. People were parking in the right-of-way. They didn't care about a parking ticket. They were willing to pay that much to be able to park and go to that #1 beach. If I hadn't had the use of bikes, I wouldn't have gone anywhere. I wouldn't get in that traffic. But luckily I was able to ride around on my bike. But this idea that just, another bridge is going to solve the problem, really? Bring more cars out there on that 2-lane road? I don't think so. I just don't think so. So people ask all the time or write letters to the editor saying that's the answer. I'm not so sure makes a lot of sense just to put more people out there.
Can you say water taxi?
Yeah, you need to have alternative means of transportation. I still would love for somebody to bring a plan to have park and ride at that Albertson Shopping Center. I keep saying it over and over
I
again.
know, I know the whole time you and I have been on the board, we've
I
said
could
that.
do it myself.
That would be great. Maybe the county needs to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it just we need to have alternatives for people to be able to enjoy themselves and not mean, I saw a horrific accident. You know, I know a lot of people were probably partying because it was a big holiday weekend. But, you know, you can say it's the #1 beach, but the quality of life gets impacted when you have that many people jammed in that space. And that's, to me, that's a real issue that we're going to have to deal with. I haven't heard anything about our beaches, which I think is wonderful. Everybody posted beautiful pictures. I hope it was all wonderful. Unfortunately, I was kind of stuck on Siesta Key.
I just read something about Ellington, though.
I just had staff to forward it to you, so Madam Chair, need to read it.
Say our beaches.
Our beaches were
Cortez
packed.
Road was backed up.
Packed, I'm sure.
She
Yeah.
should read it to the public.
That was at 3 in the afternoon.
Okay, well, just as long as we're talking about long-range issues, that certainly is a long-range issue that we're going to have to deal with. Anything else?
No, Madam Chair, read the email. I had staff to forward it to you about Ellington.
Okay,
Has a beach?
No,
do I need to read it right now?
it's one of the best places to retire.
Well, Charles, feel free to.
The Florida Report. I'm trying to, I can't pull it up in this spot for some reason.
I did see
We
something.
all received
Yeah,
emails
could you
from
read it then? I can't pull it up.
18th best place to retire.
Yeah. I just had this sent to me by someone. I don't know if that's from the publication or what, but anyway.
You guys are like me, you get every,
And it lists what they are, but I can't pull up the document. I can just read parts of it.
I get like 10 emails every 2 minutes
minutes,
or
yeah.
something, so if I can find it, Charles, I'll read it. Who would it have come from, Charles?
Jeff Gitlin. Well, it came from staff forwarded. I asked him to forward to the county commissioner. It was sent to me.
Okay, Mary Ann Lavada, forward.
It was sent to
Ellington, Ellen ranked as top place to retire in Florida. Wow, that's pretty impressive.
Continue scrolling.
Okay.
One
All right, I wanted to let you know that Ellington ranked number 131 in our best places to retire in Florida report.
Yeah, so.
We built a unique rankings equation using the following data: sales tax rate. Maybe the sales tax rate isn't too high here. Home sale price, property tax rate, healthcare locations, entertainment options, percent of population between ages 65 to 84. Okay, this is a law from somebody named Jeff. Who is Jeff? Do you
I
know?
have no idea who that
Jeff
is. He
Gitlin
sent
sent
to
it
me.
to Charles, so.
I should know, maybe I.
Best places to retire report.
Consider Ellington. What is this?
Yeah, I still don't know who Jeff is and where this came from. But that's great, good news. I think it's good news that we're able to maintain the quality of life. The question is, how do we deal with all the challenges we have? So stay tuned and come to our next work session, which is scheduled for, I think our next one is June. June 7th, fund summary
1:30?
review, 1:30. I assume that'll be on the 4th floor? Okay, so that's our next work session, and without any further comments, we are adjourned.
Hot dog.